Travels, a family travel podcast
where we share our favorite tips to make traveling for you and your family fun, easy, and affordable.
This is episode 85, Saguaro National Park. Today we're going to be talking all about visiting Saguaro National Park in Tucson, Arizona, and a couple of the other things around that area that you can do.
So Saguaro National Park is located in Tucson, Arizona, and something that's interesting about this national park that's different from a lot of national parks, I would say, is that it's literally inside of the city itself. Like, the city of Tucson divides the national park into two different districts.
Yeah, I think that is really different about this park because, so a lot of times you go to a national park and let's say it's like Zion and you're like, well, Zion is in St. George, but it's not actually in St. George. It's like 45 minutes to an hour outside of St. George. But you really are only like 5 minutes away from the actual city of Tucson when you are in Saguaro National Park. And as Tucson has grown,
it's even closer in some areas.
Right next to parts of the national park. So it's very much like right there. You don't have to find another gateway community to stay in or something like that. You can just stay in Tucson, which is what we did. We just stayed in a hotel in Tucson. I don't think there's any camping, like campsites in Saguaro National Park. I think the entire thing for camping is backcountry. And so we did not try to camp. So like Megan said, the city of Tucson divides the national park into two districts. So on the west side, you have kind of the better known, I would say, district, which is the Tucson Mountain District. And then on the east side, which I think gets less visitors, you have the Rincon Mountain District.
And I think the west side is a larger area, isn't it? It has more trails and more... I felt like there was more to do on the west side for us.
There was more for people like us to do on that side. Yeah, definitely. Whereas the other side, I don't know how they compare in terms of like square miles, but you've looked at very many national park maps. You know that most visitors only visit just the tiniest fraction of the actual square mileage of the park because parks protect land. And that's definitely true of this park, right? Mm-hmm. It is protecting the saguaro cactus forest. That's its primary reason for existing. So there's lots of land on both sides, but you only access just a very small portion of it to do hiking. And if you aren't going to do like long, intense desert hikes, you'll just be doing small hikes near kind of the visitor center areas. And there's a visitor center on both sides, and they do have separate stamps. So if you're into collecting national park stamps, you'll probably want to get a stamp on both sides because they're both considered separate national park sites, even though they're one park.
And also, I would say the west side isn't as close to town as the east side is. Like the east side, you literally are driving through a neighborhood and then get to the entrance of the east, like get to the visitor center on the east side. Whereas on the west side, not that it's far, it's just maybe like 10 or 15 minutes kind of up the mountain to get to that side of the park than it is to get to the east side of the park.
Yeah, which is interesting that you say that side is like up the mountain because the east side is actually a lot higher in elevation, but you just like, I think, go through neighborhoods on your way going up, and then you do gain some elevation when you get into the park itself. So we started over on the west side, and we went to the visitor center there in the Tucson Mountain District. The visitor center was, of course, mostly closed because of COVID, which is true of basically all national parks in the last 2 years, is that the visitor centers, their exhibits aren't open.
They have they basically have like their gift shop open.
So we couldn't really like go into the visitor center, but we did just go and pick up like Junior Ranger book and maps and check out the gift shop there. Yeah. And then we did hikes that were really close to it.
They were more like walks.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we shouldn't call them hikes, but they were walks close to it. So there was the Cactus Garden, which is, it's a garden, so it's less wild.
Yeah, it's an accessible trail that's literally right there starting in the parking lot. And you just walk along basically a sidewalk, and it takes you through, and you can see different kinds of cactus. There's lots of little like plaques that give you information about the different types that you're seeing, about some of the animals that live in the area, and things like that. And there's like benches along the way. It's very super chill and definitely a walk basically around the parking lot.
Well, you're not like walking in the parking lot.
Well, it goes around, like the garden walk goes around the parking lot.
Yeah. Yep. And then you can get on another trail, which is not paved and not accessible. You kind of have to go down because you're going into a wash. So there's the Javelina Wash Trail there. And so, of course, you wouldn't want to do that while it was raining because it would be full of water. But 99% of the time in Tucson, it's not raining.
Very dry.
And so you're normally safe to go walk there.
It takes you around the back side of the visitor center, and you can kind of see up the mountain more, and you can see a lot more of like the natural state of things instead of a curated garden.
But we did not see any javelinas.
No, and that's good because javelinas are very mean. Yeah, not nice animals.
We didn't want to see them, but it is called the Javelina Wash, and it just brings you around the other side of the visitor center. And so we did both of those. It didn't take us very long. We were probably at the
maybe
visitor center like
20 minutes to do both of them.
Yeah, not very long at all.
Yeah.
It's very short. And then we just drove a short ways, and we did the
Desert Discovery Trail.
I'm glad you remember that. All of these have very similar names.
Yeah.
So it can be hard to kind of remember what's what. The Desert Discovery Trail, which is also paved and accessible.
And very, very flat.
And very flat. And so, actually, this is a good place to go if you have accessibility concerns, because there are a number of
easily accessible walks and hikes, and things to look at, things to do.
There's definitely like really tough hikes you can do too. It's not like that's the only thing there is, but there is stuff here that you could do. Yeah. And so that is another short little walk. You see more cactus.
It gets you pretty close to some of the saguaros.
Yeah.
I feel like the cactus garden walk gets you kind of close, but this one I felt like you were even closer, and maybe that's just because on the Desert Discovery Trail, again, it's not curated like the garden is. It's in its natural state, and so things just seemed a lot closer in some of the places.
From there, we just went into the Bajada Loop Drive, which is the scenic drive on this side of the park, and
some of that is unpaved road.
It's all unpaved.
It's all unpaved.
Yeah, unless there's part right at the end that's paved, but I don't think so. I think the whole thing is unpaved, and part of it is one way. If you want to drive the entire thing, you have to go the correct way to start out with, which I think is starting from the south. Yeah. So you start from the south, and then you can drive through the one-way part to get onto the two-way part. There was a short hike that we were going to do on kind of the southern part of this loop. The parking lot was completely full. So we couldn't do that, but it was supposed to be just like about a 1 mile hike that we were going to do there. But things do fill up here. And so we just kept driving the loop, and you get to see, of course, a lot of cactus, which is kind of the theme of the whole place.
It is very interesting because lots of times when you are driving in these national parks, like you do drive through very forested areas, either to get to the parks or once you're in the park, you can be driving through lots of forests. And so it is interesting to drive this because you really are driving through a forest. It's just of cactus instead of regular trees that you're used to seeing. It's a very unique place and a very unique feeling to feel like you're driving through a forest, but it doesn't look anything like a forest that you're used to. Yeah. If you're not from Arizona.
Yeah. This drive is supposed to be doable by regular cars, but it's a varying quality. The road is, depending on where you're at. The scenic drive on the east side, definitely better for your car because it's paved, even though there's more up and down.
It's up and down.
Over
it's
there.
Very hilly, but it's paved.
But when we got around the scenic drive, we stopped at the Signal Hills picnic site, and we had our lunch there, and then we did the Signal Hills petroglyph hike.
Yes, and in that picnic area, there are some places that are covered. They have these like little, they're like cement, covered picnic areas. There's also like exposed picnic tables too that aren't covered, but most of them I feel like were fairly shaded. Yep. There wasn't anything that was like directly in the sun. And there's tons of spots. I thought sometimes you have to like walk a little bit of a ways and cross a little bridge to get to some of the other picnic areas. But even though the parking lot seemed fairly full, the picnic tables, there were plenty of them, and they were easy to get.
There were actually more picnic tables that we saw as we were doing the
hike.
And this hike's very short, but you do gain some elevation because you are going up to the top of this Signal Hill where there are all these petroglyphs on the rock. So it's short. It doesn't take very long. There's just a little elevation gain. Definitely not accessible. You have to cross a bridge and then go
up some stairs.
But it was very cool and easy to do.
The petroglyphs are pretty easy to see. I was able to see them, and I have very bad eyesight and don't always see petroglyphs very easily. So I could see them. So most people would be able to see them.
They were very close to you. Yeah. Like you could have reached out and touched them, which of course you would not do because you aren't allowed to. But
they are close enough. Very close to see. Very easy to see. So like your kids would easily be able to see them.
And you can see some of them when you're walking and you're looking up, but you actually on the hike go all the way around and then you're like right next to them. Yeah.
So after we went and did the west side, we drove back down, drove through Tucson. We went and got lunch. We might have even checked into our hotel. And then we went over to the east side of the park. And we got there kind of right before the visitor center was closing.
I mean, it wasn't really open, but before the Rangers left.
Before the Rangers left. And so over on the east side, we went and did the scenic drive. And then we did one short little hike. Again, that was a very flat, very paved trail.
So this drive is called the Cactus Forest Loop. So it's even more forested than what Megan was talking about on the west side because there are more saguaros on this east side than you can like imagine. Yeah. Especially, I mean, if you've driven through some parts of Arizona, like in the Phoenix Mesa area, and you've seen a lot of saguaro cactus, you may be like, well, I've seen a lot, but you haven't. You haven't. Until you see this. There are points, I think, there where you almost wonder, like, is this plant actually endangered? Because it seems like there's so many of them. But it definitely is endangered because it is a very small region that the saguaro actually grows in. But if you like to see them, this cactus forest is the place. And not, like I said, I don't think as many people go over to this side, but it is really cool to see.
Yeah.
And then we just stopped partway along that and did what's called the Desert Ecology Trail. And like Megan said, this one's paved and easy to do. And it just called the Ecology Trail because its signage focuses on the ecology of the desert.
Like Ben said, there's tons of signs. You can learn a ton and read about everything that you're looking at. There's also quite a few benches. I feel like this trail was a little bit longer than the Desert Discovery Trail, but not like anything significant.
No.
It's not significantly longer. But there's a lot more signage. When we went in the evening, we also were there in January. I don't know if we've mentioned that. But it was fairly shaded as well when we were there, kind of in the later afternoon, early evening. And the drive, like we mentioned before, is paved. It's very hilly, and so you are going up and down a lot. And so the speed limit is very low because of that. And it is also a one-way loop. So you get on it, and then you drive all the way around, and then you come back out by the visitor center.
Yep. Which does mean if you can't find a spot to park for a hike, like at a trailhead or something, you do need to drive all the way around and then come back and see if anybody left. So like the Desert Ecology Trail doesn't have a very large parking lot, but it turns over very quickly because it doesn't take people long at all to be there. So that's about all we did. I can't even remember if we did the little like garden walk by the visitor center. There is one there, but I don't think we did it. It's very similar, I think, to the one over on the west side. And so that's pretty much what we did in Saguaro. And I think that we probably kind of did everything that we could do with our group. It doesn't take a lot of time at Saguaro unless you're going to do some of these long hikes that go out into the desert. Yeah. And like Megan said, we were there in January, which is a good time to go because the temperature is not going to kill you. This is not a park to go visit like in the middle of the summer because it of course gets
extremely
scorching hot, dangerously. Yeah. So because it is almost in Mexico. Yep. It would be super awesome to see the saguaros in bloom, but you have to do that I think during May or June, and it's hard to predict exactly when they will bloom, and they only bloom at night. So I think it's hard to see them. Yeah. But I would love to see them someday. But I think it would be really hard to time it correctly and to actually be able to get out and see it. But it would be really cool. Yeah. And the other thing I guess to say is that this park is all about cactus, obviously. And so if you don't like cactus, don't go to this park because it will be really lame for you if you do that. In fact, probably don't go to Arizona if you don't like cactus.
So we have spent time in the Tucson area in addition to seeing saguaro. So there's a few other things that we have done that we would recommend doing. Yep. That are just kind of fun, especially if you're like us and are going to saguaro with younger children or inexperienced hikers. You kind of really only need a day, maybe even like half a day to do the park and to do both sides of the park. And that's even with us, that's even driving down there in the morning, spending time on the west side, having a long lunch, checking into our hotel, and doing a little bit on the east side. We did all of that within a day. Easily.
In January. When there's not that much sunlight.
Shorter sunlight time.
The sun was definitely going down when we were finishing. Yeah. But we drove from Mesa, Phoenix area. Yeah. So it's definitely doable to do in a day, but if you want to spend more time there, there's tons of other things that you can do. I know my family has spent a couple of trips down there doing a lot more than even we have done. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I really like in the area and that Lucy really likes is the Rooster Cogburn Ranch. And this is like an ostrich farm and other animal kind of farm. And you can go and you can pet the animals, you can feed them. There's all kinds. There's like donkeys, there's goats, there's ostriches and bunnies, and there's like a bird sanctuary place that you can go in and feed the birds. There's stingrays. There's like all kinds of random animals. And it does seem like a really random place, but it's really fun. Ben doesn't like it because he doesn't like animals. It's terrible. But Lucy and I had a really, really good time. There's nothing worse in this world than giant birds that want to kill you. The ostriches are a little scary, but everything else is fun. But I went, and that's fine. There's... Because you love your daughter. Yeah, I do. It's in a kind of a pretty area. There's some cool really mountains there, and it's not that far from Tucson. Yeah, I think it's just right less than an hour from Tucson. And the other thing that we did when we went down to Rooster Cogburns was we went to Casa Grande Ruins National Monument. And this is a really cool national monument. Mm-hmm. I like national monuments more than I like animal sanctuaries. It's one of the oldest national monuments, and I think it's the first national monument to be set aside to preserve human history. And so there are some ruins there, fairly well preserved ruins actually, of the ancestral Sonoran desert people. And so you can go out and you can walk around them. And I did see when I was writing the post for this that their visitor center is closed. but we were there previous to COVID, and so their visitor center was open when we were there, so we were able to watch a film, which I thought was really helpful. I thought that that was actually one of the places where
the film is useful.
The film was...
And not the same as every other national park or monument that you visit.
They're always useful, but they do get repetitive if you go to a lot of parks that are focused on the same thing. But this one was useful because I didn't know a lot already about the people who had lived in this area. And then there's a small museum there where you could see some of the artifacts of these people and things like that. And of course the main attraction is the ruin, which is Casa Grande, or the Great House. And there are some other ruins, but this one is like covered with a sunshade, metal like canopy basically, and so you can walk around the whole thing. You can't walk inside it, but you can walk around the whole thing and see it, and it's pretty cool. It's right there, like
right in the middle of the little town.
Yeah. So and it's right in between Phoenix and Tucson. So if you're traveling between Phoenix and Tucson, you're going to pass it. You only have to go like 20 minutes out of your way to go see it. That was worth it. I think that will kind of wrap up what we've done in the Tucson area. Like Megan said, there are lots of other things that you can do down there. One thing we didn't mention is there is like a wildlife zoo that is right outside of Saguaro National Park. And we didn't do it. We thought about doing it. We just didn't really have like that we could devote enough time, and some things were closed because of COVID, so we decided not to because it was kind of expensive. But a lot of people highly recommend that and say it's really cool. And so I think that will wrap up this episode of Yellow Van Travels, a family travel podcast. Make sure that you follow us online. You can find us on our blog at yellowvantravels.com and on Twitter at yellowvantravel.
You can also follow us on Instagram and YouTube at Yellow Van Travels. And if you liked this episode or found it helpful, please consider sharing it with your friends and family and others who like to travel. And if you could leave us a review wherever you're listening, that would really help us out and help our community grow. Happy travels. Bye.
See ya.